Pulse, shaking mind, talking Bengals, making fans fun. Heartbeats racing, excitement high. No one can stop us, reach for the sky. Who's gonna beat them? Nobody, nobody. Bengals Pulse, pumping strong. Our passion for football can't be wrong. Thank you, night, hearts beating as one. In the 50 jungle, we have fun.
Hooday, Bengal fans. He is Mon. He is Eric. I am Jake. This is the Bengals Pulse, the heartbeat of our Cincinnati Bengals. I'm telling you guys, that song is a hit. Go ahead and make a gold record. That is just outstanding. I love that. Guys, we are a couple days away from the Bengals' first preseason game. We have a lot to talk about, a couple of roster moves, a scary incident at practice, practicing on the new field turf, a bunch of stuff to get to, and then obviously preview the Bengals' first preseason game coming up this Saturday night at home in Paycor against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Before we do, though, Mon, how's your week been, buddy?
Good. Very good. I'm off for about 10 to 12 days from the fire department. I'm pumped. Got a big 2 weeks. Excited about the game this week. Excited about the Olympics. It's a lot of fun. Let's talk Bengals.
Let's talk Bengals. Eric, how you been, buddy? You been good?
Been awesome. Just diving deep into trying to have artificial intelligence create these banger of a song. And on that topic, we threw out a Twitter poll because Mon's divided. Jake and I love the new intro song. Mon's not so sure. So we threw up a Twitter poll. We have three options: the rock anthem, the 70s intro, or silence. Right now, rock anthem's winning, Mon. So you're going to have to deal with it.
Yes. Yes.
Let's go. Everybody chime in, let us know, and we'll try and kick out another one if we need. Maybe we'll go with the Stevie Nicks version, and then Mon will be happy.
I'd rather have the Borat version. So.
Mon would rather have the Rush version. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Hooday, guys. Again, we appreciate you guys joining us every week for the Bengals Pulse. This week, our second show, which is even more exciting. Again, guys, through the preseason, we are going to be here every Tuesday and Thursday night. Once the regular season starts, the Bengals Pulse will be on Thursday nights and live right after the game on Sundays, which is exciting as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Again, we appreciate Hooday to all of you guys. Make sure you comment in the comment section on the show tonight, and let us know what you think of the new opening there. I love it. I love it. Who's gonna beat Mon and Jake? Nobody. I mean, come on, Mon. That is great writing.
Okay.
I think it's even better that Mon doesn't like it. I think it's great. Jake and I don't normally agree on things, so it's interesting.
No, we don't.
It's all good. It's all good. I am. I'm good.
All right, hey, let's get to our first topic of the night, guys, because again, we do have a lot to cover tonight. The Bengals, for the first time, practicing on the new turf inside of Paycor. It looks beautiful, but as turf goes, sometimes it can be scary, and today was a scary day on that new field turf in Paycor Stadium. Charlie Jones, Chucky Sizzle, goes down with an apparent knee injury. Yoshi, after practice, says it sounds like he hit knees with somebody else, which usually is a contusion of the knee. Hopefully that's all it is and there's no ligament damage. So maybe this field turf did not and was not responsible for this injury. We hope not. But obviously, Charlie Jones, a guy that we talked about in the last show, a guy that has starting to look the part, guys. He's starting to look the part, and hopefully this is not another setback, because if it is, again, this is a guy that couldn't stay healthy last year. So Hopefully it's not, though. Hopefully Charlie Jones is good. Mon, worst case scenario, what kind of impact does this have right now on this Bengals wide receiver room if Charlie Jones has something more than a contusion? What do you think?
Well, you never want an injury to a good player. He's been one of the stars of this training camp. He's really excelled. They said he put on about 5 to 10 pounds of muscle. He came in prepared. He knew some of his weaknesses from last year, so he worked out really hard over this offseason to prepare for this camp. I guess the initial reports, it's pretty positive. It doesn't seem to be a serious injury. I'm glad. That's a good thing because he's a draft pick, and I think he has a bright future. But it is the deepest position on the roster. I think we could survive a couple injuries there. I don't want that, but I think if it happened at wide receiver, I think we're okay. There's some good players at that spot that will not make this team that will be on other NFL rosters. We are set at wide receiver. The Bengals know what they're doing there. But I don't think that's going to be the case with Charlie Jones. I think he'll be back soon, and I'm glad he did not suffer. It doesn't look like it's a major injury.
Agreed. And I love Jennifer's comment. I agree 100%, Jennifer. I think this impacts more special teams if there is an injury than that receiver room, right, guys? I mean, this is a guy who gave us a little bit of a look of what it could be like having a dynamic player back there. Obviously, Mon, you and I saw it live last year, him take that punt return back for a touchdown. Eric, you were there too, were you not? I mean, we saw this guy. Yeah. We saw this guy make a big-time play in special teams, an explosive play in special teams, something the Bengals have not had a lot of since Pac-Man. So hopefully, I agree with Jennifer. I don't know if this impacts that receiver room because, again, we talked about it last show, guys. This Bengals team could very well keep 7 wide receivers. They are so loaded, right, Ron?
They could very easily. We talked about Shedrick Jackson. Let me talk about somebody else, somebody that was with the Bengals a couple years ago. And Jake, I remember, I don't think we were doing the show when this happened, but on our text, you were having a meltdown when the Bengals let Kendrick Pryor go and he went to the Jaguars.
Yes.
I mean, you needed medicine. You really needed medicine for that.
I was. And that you're right. That was before we started the show.
It was.
And you're right. I had a serious meltdown.
Yeah, you did. I mean, I was about to say, whatever, but he's back on the roster. He's having a good camp. I've read a bunch of articles and his name has been mentioned, some videos. He's playing really well. I still think it's a long shot he makes the team, but I'm telling you, there's going to be some good wide receiver prospects that are going to get plucked from waivers, and they're going to get put on other team practice squads and or the active roster. The Bengals have a lot of good wide receivers, and don't forget Mr. UFL Darius. Was it Butler? Is that his name? Yeah, the guy that was an offensive player of the year in UFL.
The Battlehawks. Yeah, I mean you can't forget the Battlehawks. AJ,
that's Eric's second favorite team. Hey,
and the Battlehawks.
Bengals Battlehawks FSU now, right?
Yeah.
Listen, that's what we're going to call our AI rock band that sings the Pulse intro, the Battlehawks.
The Battlehawks. Listen, and you're right about Kendrick Pryor. He was, if you guys remember, he was a preseason darling that year, was he not? I mean, he really looked the part. Remember, he had a great preseason. I did have a meltdown when they got rid of him because I thought he was one of the best receivers in that room, and he's back and he made a big play.
They kept Cody Core over him. They kept Cody Core.
That was awful. Don't bring up.
That was smart.
Do not bring up Cody Core over that. Let's not go to the Alex Erickson. Let's not go to that whole Cody Core, Alex Erickson, and that whole argument between me and you for all those years, Mon. Because obviously, Mr. Erickson won out on the Cody Core battle. But you are right; they did keep Cody Core over Kendrick Pryor. And I don't know if you guys.
One of the few times I was wrong. One of the few times I was wrong. Okay?
Wait a minute. If you're never wrong and I'm never wrong, then Eric must be the one that's always wrong because you and I are never wrong, obviously, Mon. Listen, did you guys see that play on Wednesday that Kendrick Pryor made? I mean, that's a heck of a play, a contested catch. and from Joe Burrow, you make plays like that from Joe Burrow, and he's going to appreciate you a lot more. We know how Joe feels about those guys that makes plays for him. But back to Charlie Jones again. It looks like we might be okay. He was seen hanging out with teammates and joking after. So, wish you the best, Charlie. Hopefully we get to see you a little bit in preseason. You got a shot to make this roster, and hopefully that's not a bad omen for the new field turf there in Paycor Stadium. All right, Eric, what is our next topic of the night? And that is some roster moves, right? Guys, the Bengals. First of all, let's talk about who is waived, because very interesting. The Bengals waive Austin McNamara, the guy who they ended up signing as a undrafted free agent. They drafted him. They drafted him.
He was not.
He
was an undrafted free agent from Texas Tech.
Undrafted free agent. Interesting, right, guys? That they obviously didn't feel comfortable about him after bringing in that third punter, but they waive McNamara. They waive Trey Mosley again. Obviously, in the receiver room, it's very good. They sign Andre Carter, obviously a guy who's going to be taking some of those defensive tackle reps, and Joshua Pryor, a guy going to be taking some of those DN reps for Cam Sample as he goes on the reserved injured list. Let's go back to the punter situation, Mon. Is this an interesting wave already, not even going into the preseason yet and letting these guys battle it out? What are your thoughts on that? Because we were all very excited about McNamara getting signed by the Bengals, and now it's down to Robbins and Rakow. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, as Jennifer mentioned in the chat, the BYU punter was actually rated higher in this draft. He obviously has come in the last week, and he's been booming them. Everything I've read and seen, his leg is just bionic. I still think it's going to be Robbins' job, and I'll tell you why. It's punting obviously is their number one priority, but you have to be the holder on the kicks and special teams. I don't know about Rakow's history of doing that. Maybe he did that at BYU, but he has absolutely been booming it. I've been listening to the pods, all the reputable guys and comments and the videos. He is killing it. And, I would say it's probably 65-35 Brad Robbins, but if Rakow shows up in these 3 preseason games, I would not be surprised if he wins the spot.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Eric, what are your thoughts on this battle? Obviously, Robbins, I know we all are kind of rooting for Robbins. He's a friend of the Pulse. What are your thoughts on this, Eric? What do you think about the Bengals, first of all, cutting McNamara and then already, and now it's down to Robbins and Rakow? What do you think?
So I do think Robbins has a leg up. I love my puns. I do think Robbins has a leg up. It was interesting to hear that the Bengals tried to claim Rakow before the Chiefs did, and then McNamara was their backup. So when the Chiefs surprisingly cut him, they jumped out there. And listening to some of the pods, the people out there listening to it say they never heard something like it. When he kicks the ball, it's just powerful. I do think that Robbins has the benefit, just because the stuff that we've talked to Brad about and have listened to him comment on is Darren Simmons is very specific in what he wants out of a punter. And it's not necessarily booming at 75 yards every time. Darren Simmons wants to know where the ball is going to be. He wants to know if he tells the punter to kick it to the left, it's going to go to the left. He wants consistency. He wants directional punting. It's not often that we need an 85-yard punt. Usually we need a 55-yard punt. We need to land it at the 6 and have it stopped by the 4. And I think that extra year of experience that Brad has is going to give him that edge in this battle. That being said, if Rakow is out there booming it and isn't constantly kicking touchbacks, it could be up for grabs. I would say it's, 60-40, leading Brads, but we'll see. And then you go into these preseason games, and we don't want to, we need to see them punt, but at the same time, you might not punt as much if your offense is having success out there. We have the depth at wide receiver and now quarterback. We might not punt as much.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I think you're right about that. That's the one thing that coach does like. He likes to know where the ball's going, and maybe there is a comfortability with Robbins. We'll see what happens. One more roster move, guys. The Bengals today signed Carlos Davis, another UFL superstar, I guess, a defensive tackle. His brother, I guess, plays for the Texans. Is that correct? His twin brother. This is a guy, this Carlos Davis guy, that we're hearing a lot of pub about today. This was kind of a big deal. It was all over. Twitter. Is this guy a camp body mon, or does he actually have a shot at fighting for a roster spot in this room? Obviously the other two guys that they signed this week, obviously bodies for camp. But what do you think about this Carlos Davis guy? Has this guy got a shot at making the roster?
I think he's a camp body. He's played 3 years in the NFL with the Steelers. I think he's played 12 games as a few stats there. But I didn't realize, I read today, Dominic Davis has been nicked up. Then you have the issue with McKinley Jackson. They are thin a defensive line, and that's why they've signed 3 in 2 days. I think they're camp bodies. Maybe one of those 3 could stick on the practice squad. Davis does have, I think, maybe a little bit more upside. He's about 320 pounds. So he has that big body. The Bengals really don't have anybody. I mean, last year they had 2 guys that are over 330, 340. They don't really have anybody like that this year. McKinley Jackson, obviously, and I think Dominic Davis is 325. And, Davis isn't a guarantee to make the team. So it's going to be, they need guys to play. And we talked about it on the show Tuesday night. 12, 13 defensive linemen, 5 of them are hurt. So they needed to bring in some people, and they did. And I expect heavy rotation of the 3 guys that we signed the last 2 days, Saturday night.
Well, and Trey Hendrickson, obviously, it looks like he's back in the fold. Probably not going to see him at all on Saturday, and probably won't see him, too often getting into it at practice. But Vanguard does make a good point. These injuries do seem to be piling up a little bit, especially on that defensive line, something that, could end up being a scary thought, especially since I think all of us kind of thought this was a position that was already a little bit thin. And when I say thin, I don't mean not talented. I mean, we're definitely expecting a lot from some younger guys, if that's a nice way of putting it. Is there a worry now, Mon? Like Vanguard asked, is there a worry of these injuries starting to pile up on the defensive line?
I don't want to say worry. There's still over a month to go before the season starts, but you want guys like McKinley Jackson. You want some of these young guys to get a lot of snaps in preseason, because they need it. They're trying to get acclimated and prepared for the NFL game because they, productive college players, but there is a difference. And he's probably going to be limited now. And don't forget, they got joint practices coming up, and he's probably not going to get to play with that. So, reading some comments about Chris Jenkins, having a okay preseason, subpar. You haven't really heard much about him. I still have high hopes for him. I like our starters. We just need these young depth players to get ready to play because we know what happened last year. BJ Hill, all these guys started off so fast, and then they gradually declined because they were tired. They did not get a lot of rest, and that's not something I want to repeat in 2024.
And just real quick, a little bit more on this Carlos Davis guy, 6'2", 320 pounds. So definitely a big body guy. We talked a little bit about it earlier. He played for the Steelers, played for the Falcons, played for the Stallions of the UFL. A guy that was drafted in the 7th round. Again, not really a guy I'm thinking the Bengals are going to hang their hopes on. But still, I think, a good body that, the Bengals have opportunity to take a look at. Hopefully this defensive room gets healthy quick, but it is always nice to have, some guys that you can run out there, at least that first preseason game. Going to be interesting to see, because I was just about to say that, Jennifer. Thank you for leading me into that. Do you think we're at the point where the Bengals might trade for a defensive lineman? Are we at that point right now where as thin as it is? Do you guys think, Eric, I'll let you start with this one. You think the Bengals might trade for a D lineman?
I don't think so. I don't know that we're. I guess you'd have to say a wide receiver, but I don't know if we're really at a point where, we all know those end back of the roster battle guys. We know how they're showing out, but it's not until you get into the preseason and start seeing some stats up there that they really show out. Tanner number 2, haven't really heard much about him from camp, so to even really get him as trade bait, you're probably going to have to see something spectacular in the preseason here. So maybe the week before the season starts, maybe right after cutdowns or around cutdowns, but I don't think so. I think most of our injuries for our starters are not really injuries. They're just, let's protect them until the season starts. What about you, Mom?
What do you think, Mom?
No, I if you look at the Bengals our training camp the last few weeks, we're taking it on the chin when it comes to the defensive line. We're talking about it. A lot of people have been nicked up. You can go to 31 other NFL teams. There's a position group on every roster that's been hit by injuries. If there's a team out there that's 2 or 3 wide receivers are nicked up, I could potentially see that. The Bengals do have a history of doing that. Don't forget, everybody knows the B.J. Hill situation.
And I think
that's
a good point.
Well, he was going to get cut. B.J. Hill was going to get cut by the Giants, and so was the center that we traded, Price. He was going to get cut by the Bengals. So you know what? Those teams talk. They go, hey, man, we're a little weak on the interior offensive line. The Giants were. Let's take a shot. And the Bengals, of course, they needed a defensive lineman. It worked out
got
great.
Weaker.
Yeah.
And they got weaker.
Yeah.
It got better.
Yeah. They did. But, I mean, it would not surprise me. It would not surprise me if that happens. But we'll see. I've said it already. I think there's some players that are on other NFL rosters right now that are going to wind up on the Bengals roster come final cutdown. Maybe an interior offensive lineman, another defensive lineman, somebody that's a final cut. The Bengals already have their eyes on. These teams know. They know the roster bubbles of every NFL team, and they already have their eyes set on some people. So
I agree.
That'll be interesting, though, because we've talked about it before in prepping for our final cutdown shows. There's not many roster spots available. So if we're now going and grabbing somebody from another team, you've got some even harder cuts on our own team to make that happen. So
Eric, I think from 1 to 46 is pretty much set. I think there's going to be about 7 spots that are really open. I think from like 46 to 53, those are the ones, the tail end, wide receiver 6, tight end 4, cornerback 6 or 7. Those are the spots we're going to be looking at. I think like backup center. I mean, I'm telling you, if somebody that has a great offensive line right now and they cut 2 or 3 offensive linemen, teams are going to go and try to claim those guys. They really are, because, they got cut from a team that has a deep offensive line. I could see that happening. So I don't know. We'll see, man. It's going to be interesting the last week of August.
It's going to be very interesting again with this Bengals roster and how it all shapes out. I'm excited to see who makes it and who doesn't, because this Bengal roster is very, very loaded. All right, guys, let's shift this.
Crypt Keeper, thank you, Crypt Keeper.
Let's shift this discussion now. Before we get to the preseason game, guys, the Bengals made some news at practice in an interesting way. We had all out scraps at practice. And, I will say this as a football coach, it's not always a bad thing, right? This is a very intense game. There's a lot of physical, violent contact sometimes. That's just the way this game is. And sometimes this kind of thing happens. We saw that Coach Taylor let the first couple go. By the third scuffle, he got involved, got a little heated himself. And I think as a coach, our biggest thing is, we don't want it to derail a practice. That's the last thing you want. Not always a bad thing that your guys are getting after it, but you never want it to derail and take the focus off of what you're trying to accomplish at practice. It started, guys, with two of our, I guess you could call them, two of our captains. We don't really know that yet, but Ted Karras and Logan Wilson, two guys that really lead both sides of their respective side of the ball. They get into it, and then it obviously carries over a couple plays later. Logan goes after Ted, and then after that, 2 or 3 scuffles later. What are your guys' thoughts on this, Mon? I told you my thought as a coach. What do you think? Seeing something like this, you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Do you think it's part of the game? What are your thoughts on this?
I actually I had a lot of views on it, but I do love the physicality. I love them chirping. I love it because, read the tea leaves the last 2 training camps. These beat writers would say they call it a country club training camp. They weren't very physical. I don't think we're seeing that this year. I think they're hitting more. Tempers are flying. I follow all the training camps for the AFC North. I can't stand the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I admire their camp. They are hitting each other. They talk crap to each other. They get in fights. And I'm glad the Bengals are sort of mimicking that a little bit. They're getting really intense. Now, some of my takes on that, reading Trags and all the beat writers, their report from yesterday's camp, interior offensive line was getting worked, and they were frustrated. And I think Karras, I think people talk about Logan Wilson hitting him. Well, Karras is the one that took him to the ground, and that started the scuffle a little bit. I love the passion. I think Ted Karras is a wonderful human being. He should be NFL Man of the Year. And I think he's an okay center. I don't think he's elite. We don't need him to be elite. I get it. But we need that interior offensive line to play better. I'm on the record of saying this. If we have a potential roster flaw that could really set us back a little bit, it's our guards and center. It really is. And from what I've read in camp, they haven't been spectacular. And they need to play better this year. They have to. It's a must. And I hope they do.
I agree, and I think Vanguard here makes a great point because you touched on it a little bit about the interior offensive line getting worked. I'm going to say that the defense has played really well, and I think that has a little bit of something to do with it too, right? The defense last year struggled, to say that mightily. However, this year, like you said, we see Yoshi going over the middle. We see Von Bell deplete him. This is a different group of players on the defensive side of the ball than what we saw last year, especially on the back end. Again, we talked about the importance of the back end of this defense. When you have a guy like Von Bell who's back there, he's a thumper. He's the kind of guy that can bring that energy. We saw it for 2 straight years. He's one of the reasons why we went to 2 straight AFC championships. And now we're starting to see that attitude again on this defense. I do think they are playing with a chip on their shoulder. And I do think that it's a good thing that these practices are getting a little bit more physical, because I think the one thing the Bengals lacked last year was that attitude that we had seen the prior 2 years. Even with Joe Burrow's injury, we still didn't see the same attitude on defense. And I'm just happy Von Bell's back, because I think Von Bell is one of the guys that institutes that, mentality on the defensive side of the ball. And, again, you don't want to see guys cheap shotting other teammates. You don't want to see that kind of stuff. But it's okay. It's okay to get into and scrap it out a little bit. At this is coming from a coach's view, as long as it doesn't derail your practice. And the second thing is, we always talk, when the whistle blows the second time, it's done. And I think that's why Coach Taylor, I don't know if you guys saw that, but that's one of the first times I've seen Coach Taylor. It looked like he was going after somebody, yelling and screaming, because you just don't want that kind of thing to derail practice. But it's a great thing, and I think it's great to see this defense playing with a chip on his shoulder. We saw DJ Turner pick off Joe Burrow. I mean, these guys now, they're starting to fly around, and I think the offense is getting – I think they're getting a little frustrated with as well as this defense is playing. We heard Joe Burrow got into it with some of the defenders too, you know. So this is a good thing. This team, it already is taking on a different face than what we saw last year, guys.
And
Yeah,
that's one of the things that last week, unsolicited, nobody asked about the defense. One of the very first things Dan Pitcher said was that defense is something else. That communication back there, they're flying around. They are a lot more advanced than they were last year. So that's coming from someone. They didn't ask him about it. It's just that was his observation, and the instant impact that Von Bell brings is going to bring us back. And we haven't even talked about the other safety that we acquired. Joe Burrow hasn't been throwing his way because there's nothing there. You know, that's going to be a much improved part of our defense this year, and it's exciting to see.
We were really spoiled the year we went to the Super Bowl and the year after with Von Bell and Jesse Bates. They were the glue. Everybody was in position. Everybody was sound. Everybody knew where they needed to be. What happened last year? How many games did we watch? And we were like, what in the hell is going on? Wide receivers wide open, 20 yards. You're not going to see that this year. You're not going to see it at all. We talked about Logan Wilson and Pratt struggling because they were trying to, take over the Von Bell role, and they were out of position. The defense is going to be much better. They just got to get that interior defensive line fixed. Yeah, man, it's. I'm glad. Listen, I'm glad they're hitting. I'm glad that I just watch NFL Network right now that the Patriots are on and that Joe Burrow is playing Saturday night. He is playing. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Don't watch another game.
Sorry. I apologize. But I still can't believe he's going to play, but good. And next subject. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's talk about that game.
Before we do that, you're always breaking Reds news. I'll break Reds news. Your manager got ejected again. Now let's talk about the Buccaneers versus Bengals.
That guy's such a clown. God bless it. I mean, seriously, don't get me off on that. Do not get me on that tangent of David Bell and how he is still the manager of the Cincinnati Reds. Do not get me on that, Eric. I'm going to get pissed off if you start. I don't want to talk about David Bell. I do not want to talk about Cincinnati.
He holds the record for the most ejections by a Reds manager ever.
He's related to
Von Bell. To talk about the Buccaneers.
He gets ejected more than he coaches. Let's just put that. All right, so let's talk about the Buccaneers and the Bengals. All right, guys, preseason game one. Again, we know how the preseason is a little bit different, right? It's a little bit different now that we only have 3 preseason games. So, we're used to that 4-game schedule and how they play their players. We talked about it. You just said it, Mon. Joe Burrow and a lot of these starters are playing on Saturday night, which, again, I don't think is a bad thing as long as they're not in there trying to, play an entire half or something crazy like that. But you gotta think that we see some of those guys this week. We see some of those guys maybe for a drive or two against the Bears. And then obviously the Colts game going to end up being like that 4th game used to be with all the guys that are fighting for roster spots. But Buccaneers, Bengals, not sure how much we're going to see of Burrow and even the Buccaneers starters for that matter. But what are your thoughts, Mon, initially on this Buccaneers-Bengals game? What do you want to see out of this Bengals team against the Buccaneers? What do you think?
I tell you what I want to see. I want to see the backups that have been with the Bengals for the last 3 to 4 years dominate in quarter 3 and 4. I need guys like Trey Hill. I need guys like Jackson Carman, second round pick. Trey Hill's been on this roster. It's year 3 for him. I want to see Mims, our first round pick. I want to see Deontay Smith. I want to see Matt Lee. Everybody loved that pick this year in the draft. Nate Gillum's been on this roster. This is his 3rd year on the roster. These guys have been in an NFL system. When they're going against 3rd, 4th stringers of the other team, I want to see them dominate. Jackson Carman has started games in the NFL. He started mini games. Cody Ford was a high draft pick of the Buffalo Bills. He started 20-plus games. They need to dominate against 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stringers. That's what I'm looking for, because I'm telling you, I sound like a broken record. I am petrified with this interior offensive line. Our starters are okay guys. I don't think any of them are top 15 players in the NFL. But you know what? We can win with them. What's behind them scares me. And we have got to get those guys ready to play, or if they're not ready, find somebody else on another roster that is ready to play.
And I think that's, again, I know that we talked about this last year, Mom, because we talk about this every year. I agree with you 100%. I think we just don't see that from the backups on this offensive line, right? We don't see these guys going in and dominating other people's backups. And it's frustrating, right? Because, as we as fans, our thought process is, this is who we're depending on if something were to happen, and they can't block, Joe Smith or whoever that's going to end up bagging groceries next week. It's very frustrating when those guys like Jackson Carman and Cody Ford and Deontay Smith and Trey Hill and these guys that we're like, all right, come on, guys, you've been in the system long enough. Let's see something. Please, let's see something. And we can't even move the football against other people's backups. It's frustrating. I'm with you, brother. I hope we see these backup offensive line guys that are supposed to be, the security blanket. I hope we see them dominate. They've got to start dominating other people. It gets frustrating, right? It gets frustrating. I think the other thing is, I would love to see Joe Burrow one drive, go down and score a touchdown. I think that would be huge momentum for this group, even though it's a preseason. Joe Burrow hasn't played, guys, in 8.5 games. He hasn't played in a long time. So I don't know. I feel like that would give this team a big momentum boost if Joe Burrow takes that offense down. Go ahead, Mom. What are you going to say?
Eric, go ahead. I'll say when you get done. Go ahead.
I was just looking it up. It's funny. We all live in the Florida market. You'd think we would hear all this stuff about Buccaneers camp, but I haven't heard anything on the local news. So I just looked it up, and the Bucs aren't going to be playing any of their starters. We're going to be going against Kyle Trask and a flurry of backups. So it's even more paramount that we should, if our starters are out there for one drive, offense and defense, we should look dominating. And our backups are going to be playing against probably third stringers, so they should dominate. So I agree. We need to see these backup offensive linemen look like they're playing against, a high school football team, not Jake's team, but any other high school football team. They should just dominate them. And if we don't see that, then that's even more concerning.
If Cody Ford and Jackson Carman and Deontay Smith, who have played a lot of NFL football, if they're getting worked in the 3rd and 4th quarter by guys that are going to be bagging groceries at Winn-Dixie or Publix, that's a horrible look. That happened last year. And, I tell you this, Zach.
It's happened 2 or 3 years in a row. I mean, we have talked about this till nausea, that these backup offensive linemen just don't look the part, Mom.
They don't. And I don't want to be negative, man, but it's being real. Yeah. You go back to last year, they had these Warren Sharp, all these people, reputable NFL analysts. They're posting the athletic scores, and they're rating the athleticism of the offensive lines in the NFL, the Bengals are near the bottom. And I appreciate the tough guy, glass eater, rhetoric. You got to have some athleticism. You got to have it. You got to have it. And I'm telling you, I watched some videos today. I mean, I need Alex Kappa to go back to first year Alex Kappa when he was a Bengal year one, because he was playing really well. It just didn't happen last year. I don't know if he had injuries. I need him to revert back to the 2022 season, because he was solid. And I don't know. I'm really worried about the interior offensive line. I think our tackles are the best part of the offensive line. I really do. And they really, really have to step up. We've got to get better play from that spot, and we need better play from our backups. That's what I'm monitoring Saturday night. That offensive line, see how they look.
Before we get out of here, let me throw you both a question. Eric, I'll start with you. Give me one player's name that you want to see have a big game on Saturday night that's not named Joe Burrow. Give me one player's name that you just want to see shine. It could be anybody. Just don't make it an obvious guy. What do you think? Eric, give me one name.
Well, so everybody wants to see Amarius Mims dominate. So that's just a given. I'm not going to throw that out there. I always go back to T. Huddy. I want to see Tanner do Tanner things. And I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play much because he's that secure in his spot. But if Tanner Hudson's out there, I want to see a couple touchdown game.
Okay. Mon, how about you?
You know what? I'm going to talk about a guy that was on our show, Alan George, and I'll tell you why. I listened to Jay Morrison today. He said that Alan George is having a phenomenal camp.
All right.
And everybody's talking about Fig Newton and all these guys, great players. It's going to be an uphill climb for Alan George, but he looks good. I would love for him to come in and have a couple big plays. It's year 3 for him. He was an undrafted free agent from Vanderbilt. Obviously, Lou loved him. This is his 3rd year in this system. I think he could sneak onto this roster. I really do. And that's why
we need to get him back on the show.
That would be nice. Yes.
Yeah. He was just a great dude, right? I mean, he was just a great interview. I would be so happy if Alan George made that roster. I think he's a great dude. I think he's a talented guy, a very intelligent football player. I would love to see Alan George make that roster. Jennifer, great minds think alike. Jennifer, you took mine, but I'm going to say it anyways. And that is Chase Brown. I want to see Chase Brown go out there, even if it's for a quarter, and I want to see him dominate. I want to see Chase Brown in action. And we talked about it. Like, we're expecting Chase Brown to, get first team reps. We're expecting Chase Brown. There's a lot of expectations on Chase Brown. I want to see him go out against the twos and look like a starting running back in the NFL, because, guys, I still think that is the position that we need the most from, because honestly, guys, losing Joe Mixon, it's going to be hard to fill those shoes. And I don't care what anybody says, but you guys are going to realize how much Joe Mixon did for this offense when he's not there. And I want to see Chase Brown. I want him to make me feel good about Joe Mixon leaving, guys.
Do you, and I'll throw this to Mon because I think he probably has a good opinion on it, but do you really think we're going to see much of Zach Moss or Chase Brown in the preseason? I think that we've already established that we don't have a starter. We have a two-headed combo, and they're solidified as sharing. Mon, what do you think?
I think they might get a couple snaps. I think it's going to be Evans, Williams, and Kane. I think Kane's going to get the most snaps, the running back from LSU. I think they're really going to try to see what Evans has. I mean, I think there's some coaches on that staff that really, he's in a doghouse, obviously, but I think he has fans there, and they want to see him have a big preseason because, he's fighting for that roster spot. Now, this is his last chance. I think this this is his last chance.
I agree. I just think from the running back room as a whole, like I just want to feel good. I want to feel good going into the regular season that losing Joe Mixon is not as paramount as I feel like it was. I want to see Chase Brown, and I want to see him. Like I said, I want to see him look the part of a guy that can be a two-headed monster with Zach Moss. I think Zach Moss has already shown what he can do in the NFL. Had some big games last year. Baltimore Ravens, he ran all over them. Zach Moss, I feel good about. I want to feel that way about Chase Brown. All right, guys, that is another edition of the Bengals Pulse. As always, guys, if you like this podcast, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you check us out on all the awesome podcast platforms, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. As always, if you like this podcast, make sure you give us that 5-star review. We would very much appreciate that. Follow Mon on Twitter at the FireMon. Follow me on Twitter at Coach Jake Owens 9. Follow Eric on Twitter at eFlash with 2 H's 88. Follow the Wincinnati Podcast Network on Twitter at Wincinnati Pod. And please, guys, go out there and follow the Bengals Pulse on Twitter at Bengals_Pulse9. On Instagram, the same without the at Bengals_Pulse9. Again, guys, if you want all that awesome Bengals Pulse merch, make sure you check out the link down at the bottom and go on there and check out. We got some great merch to start the Bengals regular season. You need merch to wear, we got it. So make sure you check all that out. Guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As always, we appreciate you guys. Hooday to everybody. I don't know about you guys, but I look forward to talking. Our next episode, we're going to be breaking down a Bengals football game. How exciting is that, boys? He is Mon. He is Eric. I am Jake. This is the Bengals Pulse. Hooday, Bengals fans. We will see you next week.
Pulse with the most, Jake and Mon, talking Bengals, making fans fun. Heartbeats racing, excitement high. No one can stop us, reach for the sky. They're gonna beat them. Nobody